Are you someone that's taking more than 50 minutes to complete your IELTS reading test? Well, then this video will help you read faster in no time. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Success Academy, and in this video we are going to talk about how you can read faster so that you can complete your IELTS reading test in the shortest amount of time possible. Does shorter mean 30 minutes? No way, even I can't do that. But at least within 55 minutes you will be able to complete your IELTS reading test. When you take the IELTS reading test, you already know that you have three sections. Even if you're doing academic or general, you have three sections. And in the academic test, you have three paragraphs that you have to read. Each one is about 2 pages long. Look at how long this is. 6 pages that you have to read in 60 minutes. It's the same with the general test. Although there are more paragraphs that you have to read per section, it's almost still the same amount of words. It's close to 2,500 give or take, alright? Could be less, could be more, but generally 2,500 words that you have to read in 60 minutes, and that is excluding the questions. With the questions, I don't even want to think how many words you have to read. So it's honestly for anybody, it's a lot to read in 60 minutes. Alright, so how do we read it? If you think back to school, when you were going to school, what did your teachers advise you to do? They said, read each word carefully, slowly, so that you can understand everything that you are reading. Was this great advice? Yes, it was great advice, just not for IELTS. Alright, back then when you were reading, you didn't have a 60-minute time constraint. You didn't have to finish reading 2,500 words in less than 60 minutes. You had all the time in the world, so you could read carefully, understand what you were reading, and you probably didn't even have to answer questions from it. But now, with the IELTS test, this is terrible advice. If you try to read every word, word for word, and try to understand it, you will take at least 2.5 hours to understand everything. So this is what you have to do. Tip number 1, find the key words. Alright, there is no technique better than finding the key words. What are the key words? Any proper noun, any name of a person, country, animal, day of the week, month of the year, any year, all of these, any proper noun is a keyword. So highlight it. Just scan the entire document for proper nouns, highlight it. Aside from proper nouns, any date that you see, 23rd, 24th, 25th, any of those. Any number that you see, 4,000, 5,000, 600 BC, 700 BC, any number that you see, highlight it. Any scientific term, any word that doesn't really make a lot of sense to you, but it sounds like scientific mumbo jumbo, highlight it. It's probably important. These are your main types of keywords: proper nouns, dates, numbers, scientific words. Just scan through the entire document, whatever paragraph that you're reading, highlight these key words. You might not get everything in the questions, but at least, I guarantee, at least 60% of the questions will revolve around these key words. So that's the first thing that you have to do. But that is specifically based for IELTS. Overall, how do you increase your reading speeds? Well, that brings us to tip number 2. Understanding the difference between intensive and extensive reading methods. Now, the type of reading that we discussed earlier, where you read word for word every word and try to understand the meaning, that is intensive reading. Is this important for IELTS? At certain times, yes. And let me tell you what those times are. But before that, extensive reading. This is where you try to read the paragraph and just get an overall understanding. right? You just try to get an overview, just like the overview that you write for your report writing, right? You try to look at that diagram and get an overall idea of what is happening. That is extensive reading. We also call this skimming. All right, extensive reading, skimming, it's the same thing. You just read through the paragraph and you try to get a vague idea about what each section of the paragraph is about. You don't have an in-depth idea of what everything means, but you have an overall idea of what each part of the paragraph says. So that is the most important thing that you have to master. You have to master the ability to skim properly. You have to master the ability to extensively read a paragraph and get a vague idea about it. At the same time, intensive reading is important, but let me get to that a bit later. For now, just understand that extensive reading means you skim through the paragraph, you try to get a vague idea of what the paragraph is about. So that is a very important tip, and this leads us to tip number 3. Tip number 3 will help you extensively read your paragraph in a better way. How do you read your paragraph? Try to get an idea while not reading it intensively. You follow a pacer. What is a pacer? A pacer could either mean your finger or it could mean a pen. It doesn't matter what pacer you're using. Pacer is basically when you use a marker of some sort, whether your finger or your pen or whatever, and you just keep it under the words you're reading and just follow it in a rhythm. Alright? You basically create a pace. You basically create a speed in which you are reading. Alright, this makes it very easy for you to understand what you're reading. You just keep your finger and you keep following the finger throughout, so that when you're reading and you're understanding the words, it goes into your head faster. It doesn't distract you from what you are trying to do. This makes it easy for you to understand what you are reading. You're not getting distracted. You're not confused by the large amounts of words that are there. You're just following that one line and reading it so that you understand what you're reading. Some of you might question, hey, isn't this the same thing as reading it word for word? No. That's why we call it a pacer. You set the speed at which you read. So you don't wait on one word for a long time. You just keep going. You create a rhythm. You don't go back and try to reread what you don't understand. You just keep following that rhythm. All right? That is what a pacer is for. If you practice this enough times, you won't even have to use a pacer. You will be able to read very fast and get a visual idea of what you have read and get an overall understanding of what you have read in a short period of time. But you need to practice this quite often, at the very least, 2 weeks before the exam. Start reading something every day, ideally an IELTS reading practice test, and try to pace your reading. Once you do this 4, 5, 6, 7 times, you will be able to do it without a pacer, not getting distracted, and understand what you are reading. All right? Now we come to tip number 4. Don't vocalize your words as you read. A lot of people do this mistake. While they're reading, they try to vocalize, they try to say it out loud. This is a great method if you are not under a time constraint. But the more you try to read and vocalize the words, you're going to get stuck. Your reading is going to slow down. So don't vocalize the words. Just follow this pacing method, the skimming method, all right? The method where you find the key words. Don't try to vocalize the words and try to read the whole thing. It will drastically slow your reading pace down. All right, so if you're someone who does that, stop it immediately. That brings us to tip number 5. Visualize. Visualizing is so important. When I read storybooks, one thing I love to do is create the story in my head. The more I read, the more pictures I create in my head. This same principle applies when I'm reading an IELTS academic test. It doesn't matter what I'm reading. It doesn't matter whether there's a lot of scientific words, whether there's a lot of jargon that I don't understand. I get the overall idea and I create an image in my head. The moment you can visualize and start creating stories, start creating images in your head about what you read, you immediately associate what you read to that picture. This is what a lot of people suggest. Mathematicians, people who have great memory power, great memory capacity, this is what they do. They connect what they read to a picture. That is what you have to do when you are reading for the IELTS test. If you can create pictures in your mind, when you read the question, you will immediately connect that question to the picture. So even if you don't know exactly where your answer is, you will know which part of the paragraph you can find your answer. So you can immediately go from the question to the part which has your answer. Alright, so visualization is such an important technique. One of my favorite ways to start teaching visualization is to help students read storybooks. The more storybooks you read, it's very easy to visualize the story in your head. Then even when you go and do academic reading or even general reading, what you get for your general practice paper, you can visualize what they're saying in your head. If you can do this, the faster you can do this, the easier it will be for you to find answers in the reading test. Alright, so as you're skimming, as you're doing your extensive reading, try to visualize what you're reading in your head. So even if you don't know exactly where your answer is, you will know which part of the paragraph you can find your answer. Alright, that brings us to our final tip for the day: skimming, scanning, focused reading. If you want to learn more about skimming, scanning and focused reading in detail, then we have attached a video down below, so make sure to go and check that out. But just to give you an overall idea, skimming is where you read and try to get the overall idea. Scanning is when you find the keywords in the question and scan for those keywords in the paragraph. If you can scan for those keywords, the fixed and flexible keywords, if you can find both of them, that is when you do your intensive reading. When you have identified where the fixed keywords are, and if you locate at least 2 or 3 flexible keywords around that fixed keyword, then you know the answer is definitely in that specific section. Then you read word for word and understand clearly what they are trying to say. Unless you locate the keywords, both fixed and flexible, don't try to read intensively. You will just be wasting time. So make sure you follow the skim, scan and focused read. Focused read means intensive reading. When you skim, scan and focused read, you will easily be able to find your answers and read faster overall. Alright, so these are the methods that you can use when you are trying to read faster in the IELTS test, and it will certainly help you finish the entire test before the given amount of time. This is something that so many students struggle with. So many students who come even for our classes, they say, we can't finish the reading paper on time. We can only do 30 questions, 32, 33, 34 questions. We can't complete all 40, and even if we do, most of the time we're just guessing the answers. We can't identify where the answers are. So these are the techniques that we teach to help our students read faster, and these are the techniques that you can certainly use to read faster and perform better at the IELTS reading test. Right? So if this video was useful to you, make sure to subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and if you want to learn anything that you're struggling with related to IELTS, make sure to drop a comment down below and we'll help you by creating a video on that topic. topic. And also, if you are looking for a great IELTS training program, our 10-day IELTS program is the one for you. So make sure to give us a call on the number below to register for the 10-day IELTS program, inclusive of live training sessions, 50 plus mock papers, a video course, and an information bank, both of which you will have lifetime access to. Alright, so make sure to hit us up if you are interested in joining our classes, and till our next video, keep practicing.